Hello and welcome back. Welcome to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this loose summer landscape in watercolour. We have a stream that sort of runs across a shallow diagonal across the foreground towards the midground trees, and then the eyes are brought along the background tree line and then up into this lovely blue sky. So it's sort of a classic zigzag composition. It's a nice beginner-friendly tutorial. I'll tell you my materials that I use as I go, but you can use any similar colours or brushes, anything that you've got really. Hopefully this demo will just give you a bit of confidence to get stuck in and have a go at a similar scene. But just before I start, a quick promo for my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's available to purchase now from all good bookstores, and there are a couple of links in the description below if you're interested in taking a look. There are 10 projects, 5 pure watercolour and 5 line and wash. So back to today's demo. And the first thing I'm going to do is what I usually do, and that is to rough in the position of the elements of my landscape. So I'm putting in a line for my tree line and my horizon line, bringing in the shape of the stream, putting in those trees in the background, literally just scribbling in a few marks that suggest for me where these elements are. So it's not a complicated drawing, it's literally just putting a few pencil marks in where I want to position all my elements. These pencil marks won't show once everything is painted. Of course, using a pencil and pressing very lightly, you can erase as you go if you make any mistakes when you're just starting out. I'm using slightly harder marks to put in the trunks of my trees, as they're going to be quite dark anyway. And then once I feel I've got the size of my trees right and appropriate for the painting, I'm just going to scribble in some vertical marks over in this bottom left corner for reeds and grasses. I'm using the wet in wet method to paint this. So first of all, using a large wash brush, mine's a Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch modeler, but you can use any brush that's the right size for your paper. A nice big brush for the first watercolour washes will help to keep your painting really loose. I'm using Milford watercolour paper. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees, so that gravity will help as I paint. Now I've dipped into a mid-value mix of cerulean blue. It looks a little bit washed out here because the sun's streaming in through my windows, which is lovely, but it's making filming a little bit difficult. But hopefully if you'll bear with me, you'll see the correct colours at the end. Bringing in some colour down in the stream, so I've got the sky reflected in the water. And this is sap green, a light value of sap green, while the sky's still wet. And then dipping into a richer, drier mix, a creamy mix of sap green mixed with some indigo to darken it. You can see these sort of blobby marks that I'm making with the corner of my brush are softly diffusing and are creating my tree line. I can dip into a darker version of the green with more indigo added, maybe a bit of sepia, to give me some shadows near the base of that tree line, and I can sort of straighten that line out using the tips of the flat brush. 3/4 inch flat brush, clean and damp, is great for softening off that edge. And now using the same rich mixture of greens, hooker's green and sap green and indigo, I'm putting in sort of rough jumbly marks for the reeds, and then sweeping in a lighter value wetter mixture of paint across in horizontal sweeps for the field. And while all the foreground and midground greens are wet, I'm dipping into richer mixtures of greens and indigo and darkening up the sides of the stream, sort of the stream banks. That same rich mixture using the corner of my brush again to get the foliage in for the trees. Following the pencil lines that gives me that road map, and then just dabbing on the paint. You can see I'm using the corner of the brush. It's giving me these shapes, trying to make sure I leave some sky holes where the branches will show through. Now I like at this stage to use my palette knife and scrape through the rich paint back to the white of the paper to give me the basis for my tree trunks and my branches. You don't have to do this if you don't like this technique. You can either begin to put a few marks in while everything's still damp, so you get your tree trunks and branches, the main ones, softly diffusing, and then wait for it to completely dry and put in the rest of the trunks and branches. I like to scrape in those marks to start with because it's like drawing with a palette knife, and it gives me a really nice fresh shape to build on in the later stages of the painting. I'm now using my fan brush and my dark green and using vertical brush strokes, and the fan is creating these really lovely long sort of reed shapes, and I can dip into lemon yellow and paint in some lighter reeds and grasses that look like they've been touched by the sunshine, and then I can scrape into the rich paint with my palette knife again. All of this is adding to the texture and the sort of suggested detail, the something and nothing of the foreground. I'm introducing some darks at the base of the stream where the reeds meet the water, and then where the stream disappears behind the stream bank in the middle distance, adding in a few darks. My field here had dried a little bit unevenly, so I'm using a bit of the green paint and my flat brush to smooth things out a bit. And of course the horizontal brush strokes contrast with the vertical strokes used for the reeds and grasses. I've laid my board flat, and this is ordinary fine ground table salt, which I'm now sprinkling into the damp paint in the foreground. Each little grain of salt will push away the paint and create pretty patterns and textures which will add to the suggested detail in my foreground. Continuing to work, just adding a few more darks here and there where I think the painting needs it. Scraping through a few highlights. This helps to push the distant trees back by putting in these highlights and scraping these marks through the middle ground. Now I'm going to leave everything to dry. And here's the dry painting. I've lifted it back up to a 20-degree tilt. I just have a pile of a few books on my desk, which I rest my board on to get it to that kind of tilt. This is my rigger brush, and I've made a dark mixture using my dark green. I've added a bit of sepia and indigo to it to make a very dark brown. And I'm working around the marks that I scraped in earlier, connecting canopies and putting in the shadow side of the tree trunks. Trying to keep everything loose and organic. This can take a while. Don't rush with this process. We are painting using the wet on dry method, so there's no time limit to this. We can take breaks and stop and sort of step back and have a look and see how the tree's looking before deciding where to put the next brush stroke, etc. To get a natural looking tree, you want to try and make sure that your lines aren't too regimented and that you kind of taper your branches off and increase the number of fine twigs towards the ends of the canopies. I then, before it dries, I like to go through those marks and just scratch through a bit of extra texture with my palette knife because that again gives me even more sticks and twigs and a natural effect. Again, the fan brush can give lovely marks if we just want to build up an illusion of a few reeds and sticks and twigs in the middle ground below the tree. This is cerulean blue and my flat brush, and just working into the stream, darkening up the water in places. I might need to go even darker than this, but I'm going to let it dry and see how it looks first before I commit to a darker green. Just building up a few more darks here and there at the base of the reeds and grasses. It's a bit of a balancing act, just getting this sorted out. And finally, I want to use lemon yellow and my size 2 quill brush, and I'm going to glaze the grass in the background and the middle ground with the lemon yellow, just to add that look of sunlight on the grass. And hopefully you can see how that really lifts things. That final glaze just adds that little bit of sunlight. Now using the size 2 quill brush, and I've mixed a nice dark green with all of my greens and some indigo, and I'm dotting in some much darker, deeper shadows here and there in the tree canopy. And as I darken up the tree canopy, that golden sunlight on the fields and grasses seems to glow even more brightly, because we've got even more contrast in the painting. And then finally, it's a little bit fiddly, but I'm using the rigger brush and my green paints to break up the edges of the canopies a little, just dotting in little marks here and there around the ends of those twigs for tiny little leaves, just reaching out towards the sunlight. So I'm bringing some of those leaves out from the main canopy. And those little sort of delicate touches are, I think, helping to add that finishing touch to the painting. And then the same over this side. If anything goes on a bit too dark or a bit too blobby, you can dab it off with a tissue. I think that's looking a lot more natural now. I think I've added enough dots and dashes and calligraphic brushwork to the edges of the tree, but I'm not quite sure, so I'm going to remove the tape. This allows me to see the composition with fresh eyes. I can see the painting as a whole, and I can see whether it needs me to go in and make any more additions. And actually, one thing that I've noticed is that I need to darken up the stream. So I've dipped into a very light glaze of hooker's green, and I'm just glazing over the stream with that green. That takes that blue down just a little notch and desaturates it a bit and gives it a more natural look. I think I'm happy now with the amount of leaves on my tree. I feel now that everything feels much more balanced, and here's the finished painting. So this is how it looks in a better light. I hope you'll agree it's got a lovely look of sunlight on the fields, a nice sort of late spring, early summer's day by the riverside. I forgot to mention that when everything was dry, I brushed any remaining salt crystals off from the foreground with a clean dry brush. I hope that was helpful, and hopefully it's given you some ideas and inspiration to have a go at something similar, or try your own scenes using some of the methods that I've shown you here. If you enjoyed the video, then please give it a thumbs up. And why not subscribe to our channel if you haven't already? It's free to do, and it really helps with our reach. And if you want to support the channel, then hop over to Patreon, where you can see advert-free demos, exclusive content, and share your work over in the community chat group, the Art Studio. So many thanks to everybody that supports us on Patreon already. We really do appreciate you. So that's it from me. I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.